from this year was The Student of Prague,
Yes.
which I rather enjoyed. It's very spooky.
Yeah. I um I gotta say that the video quality on this one was so
Terrible.
so bad that
Absolutely
I
atrocious.
had a very hard time getting into it.
Yeah.
Um
It's very true.
this is also, by the way, is a kind of a Danish / German situation, kind of mixing together in there and making movies.
It does feel it. I would not describe this as a German expressionist film. I don't think it's nearly surreal enough for that.
No.
There is some moments of surrealism in it, but it does feel like kind of a precursor to those films a little bit.
It's sometimes referenced as an early German expressionist film, though I would agree with you that it does. I don't really feel like it makes the mark.
Yeah,
but
it doesn't quite count.
But there are the main actor went on to make some bona fide German expressionist films later on.
Main actor / co-director.
Did he co-direct?
He did.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I think. I hope I got that right.
I feel like I might have heard that. Yeah.
But yeah, it starts out almost kind of feeling like a rom-com at times. It follows this student who is described as the wildest and best swordsman in all of Prague. Which I wish I could say that about my days as a student, but
well, that's funny. I was a swordsman when I was in college, but I was not the best on the fencing team. So
I was neither the wildest student nor the best swordsman. So, but anyway, so Baldwin is out riding one day and saves a rich countess and falls in love with her. Even though there was another girl in town that is clearly in love with him, but is not a countess.
He's a climber, definitely.
Not as much of a climber as the girl from town who's in love with him, who is very good at climbing in this movie.
Yes.
She's
always climbing up into the back of scenes, kind of prowling on him.
Yeah. There is a scene where we're introduced to the Countess, where she is sort of riding through the woods, and this guy who I guess was her fiance or some such is out hunting and has just an army of dogs with him.
Yeah, very cute.
There is an actual flood, a tidal wave of dogs.
Probably about 100 dogs.
One shot never shows up again in the movie, but I was just like, that's an amazing shot of a tidal wave of dogs.
Dozens of blurry dogs.
So anyway, so Baldwin kind of feels that he can't compete for the Countess because he's broke and she's super rich and is going to rich people parties. So what he does is he makes a deal with a creepy old wizard that he meets, which,
as you do,
always ends well. So the old wizard, the deal he makes is he'll get rich if the old wizard can take anything he wants from Baldwin's room. And Baldwin's like, fine, like I don't own anything, so go for it. But what that rascally wizard does is he takes his reflection from the mirror.
Yeah, which is a really cool scene.
Very cool scene. I couldn't really figure out how they did it at first because the reflection literally walks out of the mirror and out of the room.
I mean, I assume they did what they did in the Baron Munchausen movie, where they made a double, like a room behind the mirror, right?
Yeah. But then even the sort of doubling of the actor, I was like, wait a minute, how? But then what? And there's no clear sort of like split screen.
I was reading that. I mean, maybe not.
It was a split screen.
But I was reading that there were a lot of really advanced splits. I wasn't actually sure of this because the quality was so low, but both of them, at least for most of the movie, both of the doubles were played by the same actor, and they were using double exposure to have both of them in the screen at once. And from what I read from people who watched a movie of this where they could see things more clearly, is that it was done super super seamlessly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it passed the smell test to me, definitely.
It took me a while before I could really say that, like, I'm pretty sure this is split screen. Like, for a while I was like, wait, I'm not sure how they're doing this, which is very cool.
Yeah.
So now Baldwin's got this doppelganger of him walking around. But he's super rich. And so he's sort of trying to live the rich guy life. But this doppelganger keeps kind of popping up at opportune times and freaking him out. The sort of not wealthy girl that clearly has a thing for Baldwin gets this sort of romantic rival for the Countess to duel Baldwin, but his dad asks him not to kill him. But then the doppelganger ends up going to the duel and killing him before he can show up. And so the doppelganger is just sort of like going around murdering people and just making life difficult for Baldwin.
Yeah.
There's some really great architecture in this movie. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Just because it's Prague, and Prague has nice architecture.
Yeah, and I think that at the points where I felt most sold on the idea of it being German expressionist were some of the scenes toward the end where he's hunting down the doppelganger, and there's some kind of dark scenes with jagged buildings that evoked some of the kind of deep shading and Dutch angles and whatnot of German expressionism.
I definitely got the sense that I think more thought went into the lighting and the composition than a lot of other films from this time period.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit more deliberate in terms of like framing stuff in very specific ways to have like things creeping up in the background or stuff like that. But yeah. Somewhat spooky.
Yeah. I will say
overall kind of fun.
One thing that was in this movie and actually all of the feature films that we watched, which is not a new thing, but it almost feels like, considering how universal it has just been, it might be this new established action, is that all of these movies began with a sort of like, here are the players intro, where it would say, you know, it would, the camera would focus in on the main character and it would say, this is the name of the main character, and then it would go on to the next one, and it would introduce them all one by one in these kind of like moving portraits that we first saw in the girl, a girl who did not believe in Santa Claus.
That's
and
right.
The little boy
yeah.
who did. Thank you, Edwin
What
S.
groundbreaking
Porter.
film that was. Yeah.
And this one did it in a little bit more of an elaborate way, in that it had like curtains that opened and closed, almost like a stage on them.
That's right, yeah.
The other ones were kind of just the people standing there.
Yeah, so standing there making faces. Fantomas also kind of does that.
Yeah. I didn't find a point to mention that in the Fantomas discussion, but it fades from each costume to the next that he plays, and so you see all the different characters like that. It only did in the first 2 episodes, though.
Well, they didn't want to give away what disguises he was going to have.
Oh, true.